Yeah, I think I will start now. I think it's
Okay.
7. Yeah, I will open it first. Okay. Welcome back to day 3 of the IFIS SSRC Academic Writing Workshop. Today we will be discussing salient features of publishable academic writing with Susan Lopez-Nerni. We hope you all had a chance to watch the videos ahead of time. We'll go ahead, drop the links into the chat once more for others to watch at a later time. I will drop the links through the chat box. You can, yeah, there's the link of the pre-recorded materials. And as I'm sure you are all familiar by now, but as a quick reminder, you can feel free to type your questions into the Q&A feature of the webinar, and I will share them with our speaker today, which is Susan. And without further ado, let me welcome Susan Lopez-Nerni to share some brief introductory remarks on her pre-recorded materials, salient feature of publishable academic writing. Before then, open into our Q&A session for today. So everyone, all the participants can now start post your question. And Susan, I think I will pass the floor to you now.
Thank you very much, Pinkani. And good evening, everyone. My name is Susan Nerni, and I'm the mentor in this workshop that handles the linguistic aspect of your paper, the language. As I was waiting for this webinar to begin, I was just thinking, a thought crossed my mind, why language is very important in writing, in your writing, especially if you want to get it published. This language is important because it's the first thing that your reader sees when he opens your article. Sometimes it may be a visual, a picture or something, but it's really like the first thing he sees. But it is also, for the writer, it is the last thing he has to attend to. In other words, of course, you deal with language from the beginning, from the time you write, but in the whole process of writing, editing your language is the last thing you do. So, needless to say, I believe that language is very important. And I hope that before you've come to this session, that you had a chance to watch the video recordings I made. But very briefly, my video recordings focused on what I called the salient features of academic English. And my talk focused on basically 5 salient features. There are 6 actually. The first one is academic style. Second is clarity. The third one is cohesiveness. The fourth one is consistency. The fifth is conciseness. And the last, which is also very important, is error-free grammar. But in my talk, in my video recordings, I did not talk about grammar. I only focused on the first 5. And the reason for this is because I assume that when we do these workshops, the language in the papers you submit is error-free, that you've cleared all the errors out of it. Because frankly, if we were to talk about grammar, that would take at least not just 3 days of workshopping, but many more, okay? So my talks on salient features of English focused on the first 5. And the other thing I want to just start off with is, of these 5 features, I want to emphasize on everyone that really in my work, and I've done many years of work on this, the area that needs most attention is clarity. Okay, so I highlight that, I think, in one of my slides in red. And the next one that is problematic is cohesiveness. In other words, how you connect your ideas. The other 2, which is consistency and conciseness, are also a problem, but it's not big a problem as the first 2. The first one, which is academic style, I mean, it's not really so much of a problem to many people now, because they've learned that The style that we use for research articles, like what you're writing, is what we call academic style. It's, for example, in contrast to the informal style which you use when you're talking to friends and when you're writing informal letters. But I do speak about it. I did cover it in my lecture, the academic style, briefly, but I really focused on clarity and cohesiveness. So my suggestion to everybody is that, one, you must focus on these two ideas when you want, if you want your paper to be published. Your ideas have to be very clear, and really, in effect, the clarity of your ideas is a product of cohesiveness, consistency, and conciseness, and of course, grammar. So with that, I'm ready for your questions. Oh, by the way, my husband, Paul Nerney, is here as well. I asked him to join because we always work together. He usually talks about the organization, the content and organization of the certain parts of your paper. And he acknowledges, and good for him, that while content and organization are very important, you cannot do anything without language. So we always work together. That's why he's here too. So you may ask him questions. I believe, Paul, correct? Okay. Anyway.
Yes.
All right. We're ready, Pinkani.
Okay, so there's questions coming now, and I will read the first one. I think it's for you, Susan, but Paul, feel free to jump into the answers. So the question is quite long. So it's from Rempu Rayat, a doctoral student in ITB, Indonesia. As you mentioned, formal vocabulary in the previous session. What particular dictionary is being used for academic writing today? I mean, because some terminologies are developing, such as in transportation studies, there is a supplementary dictionary of transport studies published online for free by Oxford. For me, I used to refer a definition from the news article within my folder. By that way, I can defend more than just answer the question, what do you mean by that? As consequences, that is counted as citation and adding to similarity index. What is your opinion? That's the first question.
Okay, wow, that's a long question. So basically the question is, can I recommend a dictionary that they can use for academic style? That's an interesting question, because I don't think you have a dictionary, not that I know of, that is called academic style. Okay, because dictionaries are supposed to give you the meaning of words and they are arranged in alphabetical order. But I do think one way of getting exposed to the vocabulary, especially the formal academic vocabulary in your field, is to note the words that are used in your readings in your field. Because, and then of course there is the read the sources in your field and note what are the words that are, especially the key terms in your field. Secondly, there is a dictionary, I don't have my copy here, but it's called the Activator. It's a dictionary, but it's not just an ordinary dictionary. It gives you a word, and it gives you the variations of that word. So once again, as I said in my lecture, it's the writer who chooses. I mean, nobody can tell you use this unless, of course, you're working with an editor. Okay, so your knowledge of the field plus using the dictionary as I said, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Activator. It's called the Activator. It's a rather thick book. I'm sorry, I don't have my copy here right now, but it's a good thing to look at. Then also to use the language that you have read in your field. I hope that answers the question. Yeah. Anything to add, Paul?
Just make a quick comment. The Activator, it's published by Longmans, and the Activator that Susan's referring to there is actually designed for people who are writing as opposed to people who are reading and then in a regular dictionary look up the meanings of words. So the activator, as Susan was saying, it'll give you the word that you're looking at, but it then also will give you variations of that word, but also talk about the variations of meaning so that you can pick the word that most closely fits the context that you're writing in. So it's a great book. I believe the activator now is online as well. I'm not sure if it's free. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's free or not, but it's well worth getting a hold of one of those if you're writing a lot.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if I heard the question correctly, but I think the writer also asked whether or not they need to cite definitions that come out of a specialized dictionary, like the Oxford one for transportation. And the answer to that question is no.
No, you don't cite your dictionary.
No. It's general knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Coming from the same person, the second question, where in the article structure needs strong expression sentence?
Strong expression sentence. I wish I knew what he means by that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, what is strong? The strong.
And what is weak, by the way?
Yeah, I mean,
these are metaphors. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a metaphorical language. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I mentioned in my talks that you have to be very clear.
Clear, yeah.
Okay. That's why, I mean, while you can use metaphors, you use metaphors to clarify, but not to state your main idea. I think the main idea cannot be a metaphor. It's got to be really very concrete. Or you start off with a metaphor, but then you explain what you mean. Like that question is very interesting. It's a metaphor. What is a strong sentence? Is it in an emotional sentence? Is it? Yeah, I wish I knew, but anyway.
A strongly stated sentence
worded,
with an opinion or with an interpretation. We can get crazy with this.
No. The other thing is, in my talk, I mentioned, I gave a list, a handout to the people who were watching the video. And this list included what I called strong verbs and weak verbs. Okay, like for example, or I think strong, let me just check. Like, strong and weak verbs. For example, a strong verb is establish because it's very clear and it's very, I'm using my falling back on my own question, which is, so establish is very strong, whereas weak is, as well as a weak version though is indicate. Okay, so there's a force behind the word that makes it strong. And you have to be sensitive to that. Another word that is very strong, for example, is, believe it or not, show. So if you say the data shows that, you mean you are very sure, because that's what I would mean when I say strong. There is very strong, there's very full confidence in what you're saying. So if you say the data shows versus the data suggests, then you have a strong verb versus a weak verb. But it's in the meaning of the word. It's the force behind the verb in this case that makes it strong or weak.
Yeah. Do you think we're talking about moderated claims versus
that's another thing.
Unmoderated claims? Yeah.
Yeah, I wish this person.
Strong. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, can explain what he means by strong statement.
Yeah, maybe you want to retype your questions.
Yes, please. Because the other way of looking at this is, are you asking about a moderation in your language? When you say strong statement, is it an unmoderated statement? And I say, I refer back to my talk where I said generalizations are very strong statements. So if you say, if you say, for example, the financial crisis was caused by COVID, it's very, very strong wording, you're sure that that is what happened. But you could say the financial crisis may have been caused. Then it's what I call a moderated claim. It's a less strong claim.
I'm also wondering whether or not, like another aspect to this whole thing, whether we're talking about something that is unambiguous versus something that allows multiple meanings to appear in the sentence all at once.
Yes.
What's your feeling about that, Susan?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna harken back to one of my own rationales here. You see, I'm Filipino, and in the Philippines, we have a tendency to basically soften things we say because we don't want to hurt the feelings of other people. So if I, instead of saying, pay me $10, maybe I should say, you know what? I think maybe you should try and pay me $10. I'm still saying the same thing, but I'm softening it. But notice my language is very different. I have moderated my request versus I say, pay me $10. I'm still saying the same thing, but one is softer, the other one is stronger. One is moderated, the other one is not moderated. And I notice many Asian writers are very sensitive to this. They are. I used to have students who would tell me, "Oh, but it's very rude to do that." If you say very directly that this is this. So the point is to learn how to be clear without being rude, and that's what moderation or softening your claims means. And there are ways of doing it, which in my lecture talked about, I think, five ways of moderating your claims. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Susan and Paul. I think we
Okay.
can move on to the next question. It's from Tutin from UPI. It is suggested to use active form in English writing, but oftentimes we feel that passive language is needed to strengthen the expression. How much is the use of passive form permissible or preferred or not preferred?
Actually, once again, I harken back to what I said at the beginning of my lecture, that really the writer has to decide how he wants to convey his ideas, okay? But generally, the use of the passive voice is for sentences where you do not want to focus the attention on the doer of the action. So if you instead of saying the man, say the man wrote this book, okay? You're focusing, it is an active voice. But if you say the book was written by this man, okay, the focus is not on the doer, but on the book. So it depends on how you want your reader to react to your sentence. All right. And as I mentioned in my lecture, that's why the passive voice is often used when you're describing a process. For example, the book was written by Mr. X. You're focusing on the book, not the action of, writing it. Or the experiment was conducted in the laboratory. You don't have to focus on who conducted the experiment or when was it conducted, but you're talking about that experiment was conducted by, in at night or something like that. So once again, my point is the passive voice generally in English is used when you do not want to call attention to the doer of the action. All right. So, yeah. And on the other hand, the active voice of the verb is used when you do want to focus on who did the action. So the students in the sociology department conducted this experiment versus the experiment was conducted by students. I hope that's clear.
I think that answers it very well. The next question is coming from a different person, but still talking about passive and active
Okay.
sentences. But the first question, I guess, is answered by your previous answer. There's one question: how to change the habit that tends to write in the passive voice? Any
Ah,
suggestion for tips and trick for that? Thank you.
be brave. You know, I must. I'm struck by this question because um, I've seen. I've had students who like to write in the passive voice. I think I don't know, maybe in their native language, that is the way to write formal texts. I'm not sure, okay? But it seems to me, again, that is a cultural basis for this, that people will not, that they don't want to point the fingers at the doer, okay? You're still saying what you want to say. The book was written by John Doe, okay? But the attention is the book was written, not by John Doe, rather than when you say John Doe wrote the book, which is much more direct. So people kind of like want to soften the impact of their sentence by, okay, maybe this is not too hiding behind the passive voice. But I think especially when your ideas, in the important ideas of your text, you've got to highlight the doer or the action, not, I mean, you've got to use the active voice. Unless, of course, like, you know, you're describing something that does require you to use a passive voice.
Okay. Anything to add, Paul?
No. She,
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Susan. I
said
think,
that, yeah.
Okay.
yeah, all in all, be brave. I think that's the first tips you said. And okay, let's move on to the next question. Could you please explain more about jargon? Do you suggest to avoid it?
Jargon. Did you want to answer this, Paul?
No, I was just gesturing, that's all. No.
Generally, I think people should stay away from jargon because it's a very informal style of speaking. And as I mentioned in the very first part of my talk, academic English is really basically the language by which academics communicate to each other in writing. Jargon is not part of that. I mean, you use it in other contexts. There are certainly contexts for jargon, but in the academic world, we want to be formal, we want to be precise, we want to be concrete, we want to be clear. And jargon does not always do that.
Yeah, there's also another consideration here. There is such a thing as professional jargon, and where basically there's an in-group of people who use a specialized vocabulary to talk about this particular topic or this particular topic. And anybody who falls outside that small little group with this small specialized vocabulary, they're not really considered important. So if you start using jargon, what you're doing is you're signaling to your audience, I'm only talking to a very, very, very small group of people. The rest of you, really, I don't care about you. And that, of course, can have an effect on the publishability of the research that you're doing. Because I think, as Paul Kotorska probably mentioned earlier in his talks, that oftentimes, what do editors want? They want readers. And how do you get readers? Well, you basically want to avoid using jargon so that you're talking about what you're saying, as Susan was saying, with a very kind of clear, formal language. You certainly don't want to use informal jargon for sure, but you want it to be accessible to anybody who's listening to you, even if they're not really familiar with the topic entirely per se. Then then you want them to be able to still understand what you're saying. Now, they may not understand it with the same depth as those people who have really worked on this particular topic, who have developed this jargon, which is a very, very precise way of talking about things. But basically, it's not understandable by people who have not really worked on the topic intensely. So again, if you have a big audience that's really worked on this thing, maybe you can get away with jargon. I don't know, but I do know that studies that people have put out, Paul Nation for one, they basically say as soon as your jargon gets to be somewhere, I think it's over 2 or 3% of the total word count of a text, people can't understand you any longer. So you want to be like really careful with that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I think the point to remember, and this Paul has made it, and the Paul Kotoska has made it too, is you want to have readers for your paper. And if you use jargon, which is a special, has a special meaning for only a limited group of people, you're reducing the chances that your article will reach as many people as it should. So you want to reach out to many people as you can.
Okay. Thank you again, Paul and Susan. The next question came from Eka, Indiana University. My question is about moderating claims. Your slide says that one of the ways to do it is to soften generalizations. My major is law and currently writing on a topic that does not have many judicial decisions. Most of the recent investigations of the cases stopped and did not go to court. Therefore, I am mostly using news stories in analyzing cases. I am not sure I should use according to the news stories, the case were ... But do you have any suggestions for this matter?
Actually, I did give 5 ways of moderating your claims. You could use, just very quickly, one is to use different modals. Another way is using certain words like to distance yourself from what you're talking about, which is like, you say, for example, the study in 1995 showed this. Okay, so you're saying that study did it, but not this one. So you're distancing yourself, your data, your own statement or your own research from that one. And then you also you can qualify the people you are, or the cases you are talking about. The cases that happened in 1995 were like this, which doesn't mean that the ones that happened in 1996 are the same. So you show the limitations of your data. My strong recommendation is do not over moderate, like using several of these moderating stances or strategies, because in the end, what you're coming out will be a statement that will have no credibility at all. Okay, so for the lady or the person who asked this question, I suggest please look at those 5 strategies that I recommended, and you can use all of them in various instances of your statements.
Also, I was thinking, just to pick up on the last statement you were making about how much you actually moderate a claim, is that the situation that you're talking, now talking to the person in Indiana, the situation that you outlined was that you're dealing with a situation where literally the cases did not go to court, and therefore your data is going to be basically probably anecdotal data, things that people told you about the case and everything. And if that's your data, that's your data.
Yeah, that is it. And
that's it. This is the best data there is to be able to talk about that particular situation. So there may be no need to apologize in a sense. For what people said, because they were the people who were probably most directly involved with this. as basically participants. And so what you're doing is you're talking to the people who are actually there. And if you can demonstrate through what you've done is, well, this person talking about this kind of case said this. Then we have somebody else who was involved in a different case, same kind of issue, but different case. And we notice similarities or we notice differences between the statements of these people. And then as we begin to bring this out more and more, as if you have, let's say, I don't know, let's say you have 50 respondents in your study. I don't know how many people you had, but let's say you had 50 respondents and you have analyzed what they were saying it was all about the same issue, but different cases that were brought up possibly to go to court, but never got there. And these people are talking about it. So you begin to look for patterns of differences and similarities. And then you try to explain, well, why are we getting the similarities we're getting? Why are we getting the differences that we're getting? And if you put that together, based on what people have said, you probably made the strongest, your interpretation of what's going on, your explanation it's probably the strongest thing that you could actually be making.
Yeah.
So,
Actually, let me pick up on one important point that Paul mentioned, which is, if that is the only source of your data, you can't do anything about it. However, it will probably work for you if you say at the very beginning, or you basically front the limitation of your data rather than saying it at the end. So then you say this data is based on cases that were never brought to court. Hence, there is only a report of people who were involved in it. No judgments were made on it. And after that, everything you say in your paper should be taken in that context. So you don't have to apologize all the time, but front that. And then at the end of your paper, then you say that again. So these are the findings of this paper. But given the fact that they are based on unsettled cases or what. So the reader is well aware of the data that he's reading and that you are writing about and the context or the limitations of it. I think that's only fair. Because if you don't have any other data, there's nothing you can do. Nothing more you can do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul and Susan. The next question came from Subandri Simbolon from Pontianak. In his presentation, he meant Paul Kratoska, the first day of lecture. Paul Kratoska compared common differences between Asian and English language, academic writing, and expressing argument. He said that English language writing use contentious statements to provoke discussion, while Asian writing avoid contentious statements to minimize confrontation. So, based on your explanation about moderation claim, I think that you referred to Asian language writing. Could you give more explanation about moderation claim? Should we avoid confrontation by sounding our arguments?
Can I say something?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. You go first. You go first.
Yeah. Thank you. When you talk about people who are consciously contentious about doing what they're doing in the academe, I mean, I think of my own field, just linguistics, and we have a few people like this, and they go after one another. They're out there to provoke people, and everybody, and they're usually very, very bright, even sometimes interesting people. But the thing is that as you start to read, I'm not going to mention anybody's names actually. As you begin to read this stuff, it becomes very tiresome after a while to read, where they're always kind of attack, so you're getting a lot of interpretation, but you're not really getting much in the way of explanation. Why are things, or how are things actually happening, or why are they so in the ways that they are so. So you're getting very, actually very little science, if I can put it that way. You're getting very little science and you're getting a lot of opinion. I mean, sometimes it's done it's almost amusing to see it. But you know, it's like watching a blood sport. You know, who can draw the most blood from other people, and that in the end is not really science. It's kind of beside the point of science. So actually, when you look at Western academics, if I can use that term, it doesn't actually. There's no such thing as a West or the East. But when you start to look at that, I think what we're looking at is certain personalities who enjoy provoking, but the vast majority of us don't do that. I mean, as researchers, what we tend to do is we tend to try to build on each other's research, so that we're creating a basically an understanding of whatever it is that we're talking about. So it's more, in the terms I was using last night, it's more descriptively adequate, it's more explanatorily adequate. And rather than trying to tear somebody down, I always like to use the phrases, rather than sneering and jeering if you don't have power, and shaming and blaming if you do have power, because that's oftentimes what this contentiousness really comes down to in the end. Rather than engaging in that, why don't we just engage in the hard work of science? And I think you'll find people, most researchers all over the world, the vast majority of us really actually prefer not to tear down the other guy. We tend to take what they've said. We may agree, we may not agree with it, but we respectfully try to basically either expand what they've said, or to moderate what they've said, or in some cases even to replace what they've said. But you never tear them down. You don't try to be contentious.
Yeah. I do.
Basically, you don't try to be an asshole, essentially.
No.
Sorry.
My simple answer to that is, if you're very certain that what you're saying is accurate because you have the data to prove it, you have analyzed it as well as you can, my advice is to be brave and say it. Okay? Because
everybody listen to Susan, don't listen to me.
No,
Yeah.
I think because sometimes people are there because they're writing it for the first time, or they're not published authors, that they don't want to risk it.
Yeah, they don't have the confidence.
They don't have the confidence, But and I tell this to my students: if you have something to say it. But make sure you say it well. That's why language is very important. And, I mean, you can't, and this is something that you learn gradually. I mean, some people may have the gift of expressing themselves forcefully, tactfully, beautifully. And so people are just willing to accept their ideas. And that's good. But we can all learn to write well. All right. But once we have an idea, and I tell this to I taught high school for a while. I told my students, if you have something to say it. But make sure you say it well.
I think that's the challenge to say it.
No. But that's what I mean. Make sure that you have done a good job.
Yes.
And, and be confident and then say it.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan and Paul. Okay. The next question came from Niputu Aryani from Universitas Ciputra Surabaya. I have read about writing articles that have to be determined by the tenses. For example, the introduction must use present tense, method use past tense, etc. Should I have to literally follow this suggestion, or do you have any other ideas related to this? The techniques
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
The techniques of linguistic that you present in some ways contains more words to write on the manuscript, which is more technique to be written, as English is not my main language. Do you have any tips on how to know more about linguistics technique? Would you please share the handouts for us to read from your YouTube? Thank you so much.
Okay, that's a lot. First of all, I would warn, I mean, I am always wary of people who say that in the introduction, you must use present tense, in the literature review, you must use past tense. It doesn't work like that. It's the accuracy of what you want to say. If something, I mean, past tense means you're talking about something that has no bearing on the present. Present tense means whatever you say has bearing on in the past, in the present, and in the future. That's why it's called a generalization. So while there are tendencies to say that, when you're giving the background of your paper, in 1955, this happened, and people did this, then fine, because you're talking about something that happened in the past. Okay, but you can't always say that the tenses should be like this and like this. No, it depends on how you are perceiving what you are talking about. If I say, for example, the sun, all men are mortal. Men are mortal even in the past, in the present, and they will be mortal in the future. So the point I want to make here is it really depends on how you perceive the idea that you are trying to communicate. And that is what governs the tenses of your paper. However, the other point that I mentioned in my talk is the consistency of tenses, where you cannot shift from past to present without any reason for doing so. There has to be a reason why you're going from past to present, or present to past. And there are several ways of doing that. You can say in 1995, it was like this, but in the future, it will be like this. So there's a guide for the reader to contextualize what you're saying. And tenses are very important in that regard. I'm sorry, what was the other? She had something else in that question which struck me. What was the latter part of the question? Yeah, what was the latter part?
Do you have any tips on how to know more about linguistic technique?
Okay, you know what? My usual response to that is read. Read. My students used to ask me, what should I read? And I tell them to read anything. Because by reading as much material as you can, especially about your field, then you will get the exposure to how ideas are expressed by various people, and then you can learn to express yourself equally well. The other thing is communicate with other people, especially people who are interested in doing what you're doing, because by exchanging ideas, you are enriching each other. By the way, this is the reason why I think it's not tomorrow, but on Friday, one of the activities in this workshop is a group discussion, because we expect, or we know that when people talk to each other, they learn from each other. They learn the language, they learn about ideas, they learn about different perspectives. And that's another way of enriching yourself as a writer. You read, you communicate, and then of course, you practice, you write. Nothing, I can't say specifically, write 10 times a day. No, you cannot. I mean, it's got to be something that is much more natural, I think, than that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
The last part of the question, I think she's asking about the handouts from your lecture.
I see. Actually, when I gave the recordings of that lecture, the handouts came with that. So I think that question should be addressed to IFIS.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, then we'll move on to the next question then. It's from Elizabeth. How do we differentiate between academic or formal words and informal ones?
its usage, really, how it's used. There's no such thing as formal vocabulary, a dictionary of formal vocabulary and informal vocabulary, because it's really the words that are used in informal contexts are informal words. Like, I don't know whether it was in this paper, but somebody was writing, the thing that people like most is, okay, there's nothing wrong with that sentence, but it's informal. You have to say the factor or the idea that people like. So academic language is much more precise. Why? Because because the informal variation is usually used when you're talking and you're talking to somebody and you can explain as you go along. Whereas the academic language is usually much more precise because it's written and it actually doesn't, it's very precise and does not waste time. It's concise. Please, Paul.
Can I speak to that just a little bit? Actually, when we're looking at academic, aside from the vocabulary, it's also in the grammar. So one way of thinking about the grammar of formal language, whether it's written or spoken, is that when you're being formal, there's a tendency for the sentence to be lexically dense and grammatically simple. And what that means is there's a lot of ideas being packed into that single sentence that will need to be unpacked later on. But the grammar is very simple. You have your subject, your verb, your object, and maybe complements, and that's it. It's very, 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 very simple sentence. But the ideas are packed in there in a very, very concentrated sort of way. And that's okay, because especially when people are reading things, they can read the sentence fast, or they can read it slow. They can read it
over and over again
if they wish, and things like that. But even in formal academic English, when we talk, it's different. What we have then is what I'm going to call something that's grammatically very complex, but lexically sparse, which means that there's going to be, well, I'm doing this even as I talk here. If you were to take the sentences I've been talking about, you'll find that there's one main theme running through the sentence, but then I'm using all these so-called subordinate clauses to basically explain what it is that I'm saying. And so what happens there is, although it's grammatically, my sentences are very, very grammatically complex, what I'm actually doing is I'm giving the reader time to just okay, I got it. Because what's happening is the information is being processed through the ears. So it's being processed orally through the ears. And that's all. You can't, there's nothing for you to see. It's only what you hear. So within microseconds, you have to be able to actually process and understand what's being said, so you're ready for the next thing that's coming. So if there's a lot of complexity going on, there'll be one main idea there, but then there's not so much important stuff happening until the next idea comes up. Where's my hand going to? Okay, and so there's a lot of space in between the ideas, and it gives people time to really figure out what's actually being said. So that's really the big difference between formal English and informal English, and also even formal speaking tends to be lexically sparse but grammatically complex. But it's good because it helps people process information when the information is only going through their ears. If it's coming through the eyes, because it's on a piece of paper or on a computer screen, then you can afford to be grammatically very simple, but really, really packed with all kinds of ideas inside the sentence, very close together. So if you can think about it that way.
Okay. Thank you again, Susan and Paul. The next question came from Poppy Siahaan. First of all, she's saying thank you for the tip on Longman Language Activator. Yeah, she normally uses Merriam-Webster, which has dictionary and thesaurus where you can find synonyms, and sometimes also sentences examples. But Webster is American English. If the journal asks for British English, it's not useful. But she has another question. She's asking about, do you have any experience with the premium version of the tool Grammarly.com? She said, I use the Grammarly free version. It helps me with the basic grammar as I still have issues with English grammar. For example, plural nouns with singular verb or noun without article, etc., which will be corrected on the free version. But they always suggest to buy the premium version, saying some additional writing issues that I have. For example, word choice, comma misuse within clauses, punctuation in compound or complex sentences, worthy sentences, and etc. Do you think it's worth it to pay $9.60 for a month to get the premium version? Yeah, maybe.
Over to you,
I
dear
was
Susan.
expecting a question about Grammarly to come, and I thought nobody would ask me anymore. I'm sorry, Paul. What were you saying?
Over to you. I know you're.
Okay.
I know you're ready for this question.
I've been asked about this before, and I think Grammarly, how would I say this, is a useful editing tool. The trouble is people use it as a writing tool, which is problematic. I have seen texts where the language, the grammar is correct, the wording is correct, but the whole text is incomprehensible. Why? Because the ideas were not clear to begin with. They may have been, my suspicion is that they were translated and then the translation subjected to Grammarly. So Grammarly will correct the grammar, give you the right words and all that. But if the idea was not sound to begin with, I don't think Grammarly can help you very well.
Yeah.
So,
let me give a quick example of that.
Okay.
Here's a grammatical sentence that is incomprehensible. Sleeping green ideas sleep furiously.
No, furious green ideas.
Ideas sleep furious. Yeah.
This is a typical example.
Noam
Chomsky example.
Yeah.
In other words, your ideas need to be sound and clear first, and then they have to be organized in such a way so that they are comprehensible. I have seen texts, and that's why I suspected that they were subjected to something like Grammarly. Well, the language is fine, but I could not understand it. And when I spoke to the writer, I guess what happened is they wrote it in their native language and then they translated it. Of course, the language is correct, but the whole text is incomprehensible. So I would suggest, the other thing too is about Grammarly is note that Grammarly is meant for the audience for Grammarly texts is not usually the academic people.
Business.
Okay? So it's business. So it has a style that is very friendly and very, how do you call it? Persuasive, because that's what normally you want to do in your business communication. So the audience and the purpose of things like Grammarly is different from the audience and the purpose of an academic text. Okay, so I mean, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying that one, start with your ideas, sound ideas, then organize them into like basically what Paul's talking about, and then if you want, translate it and then correct the grammar, and then Grammarly may help you with that. But don't expect it to write it for you, because you will have correct sentences of a text that is incomprehensible. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's definitely a new insight for me too. People are talking about Grammarly as well around now. Okay.
No, I think there is I mean, actually, if you don't want to use Grammarly, you can hire an editor to do it for you. Of course, it might be more expensive, but I know in some universities, they have, for people who are writing their PhD dissertations, they have funds for the student to hire an editor. And the editor does what we call developmental editing, which is basically the editor clarifies your ideas and talks to you and ensures that he or she understands what you're talking about and then helps you to write it or to revise it. But Grammarly cannot do that, I think. Grammarly works on your language, full stop, not on your ideas, which is the problem.
So probably the basic version, the one that's free, is good enough rather than.
I think it's good enough, but really, it's to clean up what you have written. But really must have the good ideas organized in a sequence, in a logical and effective way. Then you clean up the language.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. The next question came from Niputu Aryani. What about writing for a presentation for a conference? Is there any linguistic tech?
Writing for a presentation. Sorry, you got cut off.
Yeah, she's really cut off.
Pinkani, you got cut off.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. This is Joseph. I'll read.
Joseph.
Okay. Okay. Am I here again? I'm sorry.
Yes, you're here again. Can you say again?
I need to turn my video. Sorry. Okay. What about writing for a presentation for a conference? Is there any linguistic technique to make a presentation concise, to more understandable?
Yes. You see, writing is very different from speaking, and the styles are very different. So hello, are you there? So if you're writing for a conference, you should not write it like you would write your journal article. You should write it for a presentation. Okay. And that's an entirely different workshop altogether, if you ask me.
Yeah.
I must say, one of the things that Paul and I used to do, and we used to do this for the Asian Research Institute in the NUS, is we prepare graduate students for writing a paper and then making it, presenting it as a conference paper. But these are two different undertakings. They're not the same.
Yeah.
For one thing, when you are writing for a conference, you should visualize your information more clearly, because now, especially when you're making presentations, you're using PowerPoint slides or visuals, which you don't normally do in your written text. So
maybe that's an idea for another workshop.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
that would be nice.
Yeah. Okay. The next question. It's more about structure, I guess. Academically, a paragraph is between 5 to 10 sentences, but there are also some writers that write more than 10 sentences in a paragraph. How many sentences is appropriate for a research paragraph?
Oh, okay. You know what? I don't think that rule holds. I mean, you should not say, oh, it's more than 10 sentences. It's not a good paragraph. No, I think it depends on the complexity of your idea. Maybe the idea is, maybe the thing to remember is one paragraph, one main idea. So one of the things that I sometimes do, and I think maybe Paul Learning Podcast do this also, that when we're working on a paper with somebody and we're seeing all this writing that's very confusing, we ask the person, okay, given this paragraph, which one paragraph, one main idea, and we show them a paragraph. Okay, in this paragraph, what is the one thing you have to say? Okay, and if they cannot do that, if they have to write 3 or 4 sentences, this is called a topic sentence. If you're writing more than one topic sentence for one paragraph, that means it's too long. You have to break it up into 3 paragraphs. So it's not the idea of how many sentences. It's the complexity of the idea that you're dealing with in one paragraph. Okay, so try this, the person who asked the question, try this on your paper. Look at one paragraph. And if you were asked to summarize that paragraph in one sentence, what would it be? And if you cannot do that, that means that paragraph is too long. So you have to break it up. Yeah. I think that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, that answers the question.
Okay.
Okay. I think we have answered all the questions given by the participants. Maybe I would ask one more time if there's any more question the participants want to pose here, so you can type it down in the Q&A feature while Susan and Paul are still here, probably before they're gone. If there's any more questions. Yeah. Okay. I think there's no more questions for now, Susan and Paul.
Okay. Well,
So
thank you very much, first of all, Pinkani, for your handling of this workshop, this Q&A. And thank you, everybody, for your questions, because I think your questions always help us to grow as well. So
yeah,
more power to you, and we look forward to working with you at the group session, because that's one of my favorite parts of the workshop, because then everybody can really exchange and question and comment on ideas. So
yes.
thank you. And Yusuf, thank you. I see you there, but I don't know whether you're there.
I'm here.
He's there. He's
Thank
there.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
There he
Thank
is.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Once
Okay,
again,
everybody.
thank you, Paul and Susan,
All right.
for your answers. I think it was a really interesting discussions,
Okay.
even for
One more
me
question.
as the moderator here. So I learned a
Thank you.
lot.
All right.
I'm sure participants also found it very fruitful and useful for them.
I hope so.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Good night, everyone.
good night,
Thank
Susan.
you very much for coming.
Okay. Yes. Good night.
Yeah. Okay, so for all the participants, tomorrow's session will start at 6:30 p.m. Western Indonesian time, and we will hold another Q&A session based on video materials as we did just now. So please follow the link in the chat to watch Linda Grove's presentation on preparing literature reviews. So maybe from the committee can send it in the chat box if there is any. And in the live session, tomorrow we will meet with Linda to discuss the topic preparing literature reviews, and Paul Kratoska, who will give presentations on the publishing process in terms of getting published and scholarly ethics. The webinar link for tomorrow is also being dropped into the chat. So I will send the link for the webinar tomorrow. Okay. Pak Yosef, I think there's one more question.
Oh,
Yeah, there's one more.
There's one
Is it
more.
okay, Paul and Susan?
If you don't,
yeah,
if you don't
sure,
mind.
no problem. Yeah.
Okay, it's from Subandri. Susan, would you like to show us more about one paragraph, one main idea?
How can I show that?
I can talk about it if you want a little bit.
Okay, yeah, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So-
wish, yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, basically, what you do need is you need a topic sentence. In other words, this is what this paragraph is going to be about. Then, what you need to do is, now this basically depends at this point. If you're trying to describe something, then you have to basically break whatever it is you're talking about down into the behaviors that are associated with it and the characteristics that are associated with it. And you have to decide, what is the first characteristic or behavior that I need to tell my readers so that they can understand how that is connected to all the other characteristics and behaviors. So you have to start to sequence things here. So you'd have to say, what's the first thing I need to talk about? Then having talked about that, what's the second thing I need to talk about? Then to really kind of understand how the first and the second are connected, what's the third thing I need to talk about? And so forth and so on. So you're doing that. And then finally, you basically try to wrap up the paragraph and say, well, so far, here's what we understand about the topic, given what I have described in terms of characteristics and behaviors. On the other hand, you may not be writing a descriptive paragraph. You might be writing an explanatory paragraph where, once again, you've got your topic sentence, and here's the thing we're going to talk about. But this time, we assume that it's not a problem with the descriptions of things, but and I'm going to put my hands up here and try to keep them very, very, very still so they don't disappear. But I have one thing I have described, and I have a second thing that I have described. Now, what's in between them is a relationship. See, we never see relationships. Relationships are invisible. They're there, but we don't see them. We can't really describe them. We can only infer them. So you would say then, what is the first relationship between these things that we have to talk about? What's the second relationship we need to talk about between these things? What's the third relationship? And then finally, how do all these relationships come together so that we somehow explain why we're getting the characteristics and the behaviors that we're getting? And so that's the way paragraphs are shaped. Whether you're describing, whether you're explaining. We could go on and we could talk about paragraphs of interpretation and everything, but I'm going to stop. We're going to stop right there. But that kind of gives you the idea. You got three things. You got the topic. You have a description or explanation of what you're talking about, and then you have, here's what we have learned so far. Because generally your paragraph is working with other paragraphs. So the next paragraph may pick up from the first paragraph and start to elaborate on that. Okay, Susan, anything?
No, I was just thinking about a simple way of looking at it is, and that's a simple exercise for you. Take a paragraph, any paragraph in anything, and see if you can determine what is the topic in that paragraph. So pull out what is the subject that's being talked about throughout the entire paragraph. What is the topic? Pull that out. And then, because a topic sentence requires a topic and a comment about it, then you go back to the paragraph and see what is being said about this topic. Okay? If by doing that simple experiment, you find out that the paragraph is talking about more than one topic, then it's time to think of more than one paragraph. The other thing is, when you look through the paragraph and you find that there are many things that are being said about that paragraph, that topic, and they're not related in any way. So for example, then it's time to spread them out into 3 or 4 paragraphs. For example, we're talking about, all right, I don't know whether you have durian. You have durian in Indonesia?
Yes,
fine.
we do.
Okay. If I say durian is an exotic fruit, it's very tasty, it's very thorny, it's very expensive. Clearly, I'm talking about durian, one topic. But then the things I'm saying about durian are very different. Like, it's very tasty. I have to explain the whole taste, but that requires one paragraph. And then I forgot, the aroma, the odor, the smell of durian is another topic. Okay, and the taste of durian, expense of durian. Okay, maybe you can say durian is a very popular fruit. It is da. Okay, then you can say all of these things mean it's popular. So you can talk about it in one paragraph. But the topic is what you're saying about the topic is only one. It's popular because of the several reasons. Okay, depending also on the complexity of how far you want to explain each of these. Okay, so just as an experiment for the person who asked this question, try. Just get any paragraph that you come across and see, or try your own writing. See, look at one paragraph. See, what is the topic it's talking about? It's more than talking about more than two topics and you're combining them there for no reason. Then it's time to separate it. Okay, you know, when I was teaching at NUS, I was teaching undergrad writing. Paragraph writing we did it in about a couple of weeks. We talked about it in weeks. It's not something you can talk about in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's the essence of it. One topic, one main idea, one paragraph.
Yeah.
I hope
Okay.
that.
I think that's very clear. And yeah, we have to stick to that principle, I guess, throughout our writing process.
Yeah, no. But you see, just test yourself. Just find out for yourself when you look at your writing. See, you know, if you're talking about two things in one paragraph, that means separate them.
Yeah.
Two important things, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Paul. I think
Yes.
that concludes our session for today.
All right.
Yeah, I will officially close the session for today. So
Okay.
to all participants, thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Paul and Susan, for your answers.
Okay.